So welcome today to this session on automation. My name is Javier Antic. I'm product manager in the automated One Solutions team. I've been in Juniper for about 16 years, and I want to spend the next few minutes focusing on how do we automate workflows for agility and control, but in particular, how do we address the challenges that are associated to this process? And how do we make automation simple, right? How do we make the process of deploying automation simple? So I hope through the next few minutes, we will go through some content that will allow you to see some advice and some techniques to make successful your automation journey. So I want to start by giving a view, a kind of business view on the impact of network automation. We always talk about network automation. It's really about alignment between your network and your business, and in that process, driving customer experience. When we think about your requirements from a time-to-market perspective, right, this is really about how do you become more agile in deploying new services or doing changes on existing service definitions. And this is really about service abstraction. This is really about how do we create new service models in a way that it's really tailored to your specific context, and how can you do it in a timely manner, right? So key functional area about automation. The second key business goal is how do we improve our predictability in our business, which of course, in particularly for those whose business is highly dependent on the network infrastructure, mainly service providers, right? The predictability of your operations, right? How do you make your operations, your actions on the network more predictable? It's extremely important. And workflow automation, it's about that, right? And we will elaborate through this on the session. Efficiency, right? Cost efficiency. How do we make the maximum use of our network assets? This is all about resource optimization based on different types of constraints, maybe bandwidth constraints, maybe latency constraints, and how do we enforce those constraints on the network, potentially using SRTE policies. So that's also the key functional area of automation. Service level objectives, which are highly correlated with our customer experience, and how do we understand what is happening on the network, the service that we are delivering from the network fits into those service level objectives. We need to get real-time streaming telemetry information and be able to derive insights, potentially using ML and AI insights. So these are the key business goals and how automation aligns with them. But let's see, when we think about automation and we think about the great alignment that it has with the business, we would tend to believe that automation should be broadly deployed across the industry. I want to refer to this report that we do every year. We call it Sonar, State of the Art of Network Automation. And you can actually download it from our website if you're interested. There's a lot of good insights. But one of them that I wanted to particularly refer to, because it serves for the purpose of the analysis that I want to do in the session, is that when we ask about what is the level of automation that is actually in place, right? Actually, the glass is not half full. It's actually, it's actually half empty, or even less, right? As you see in the different domains, almost 40%, or actually less than 40%, is the level of automation that we see across most of the network domains. So if automation is so relevant for the business goals that we were highlighting earlier, why is it that the success at the industry level is not there? Why is it that we are only 40% automating our networks where it is so critical? And let's see what is that gap about, right? Let's analyze what are the skills necessary to automate. Challenges for a network engineer to become an automation engineer, or a network engineer that can do automation. I'm using also some insights of one recent report from Damien Garros, a very well-known automation architect. He made this Net DevOps survey recently that you can also find. But one of the interesting insights from this report, it was about What is the complexity? What does it take for a network engineer to transition to this role of network automation? And you can actually perceive from this data that this process of transitioning, of learning about automation is extremely challenging, right? A network engineer is supposed to master a lot of networking technologies already: BGP, OpenConfig, segment routing, EVPN, OSPF, and whatnot, right? This is a long list of technologies that need to be mastered. And now we are asking the network engineer to master as well Python programming, Ansible, Napalm, SalStack, and even eventually AI and ML techniques. This is probably way too much that we're asking the network engineer, and probably some will be able to learn about all those and master everything, but the majority might not. So we need to wonder whether we are actually offering automation in a way that is truly consumable by a network engineer. I think we have here one of the key challenges. If we were to analyze automation as if it was a product, right? Let's think of, we're trying to sell something that we call automation, just to put it this way. Does automation as a product solve a real problem? And from what we've seen earlier, it definitely does. It's really aligned with what we need from a business perspective. Is there a supply problem? Is there a lack of technology? So is there a lack of options for any of you to deploy automation? The answer is no. There's many of those. There's products, there's open source technologies, there's multitude of options to deploy automation, right? Is there demand for this kind of solutions? Definitely, right? There is a lot of demand, and we perceive it when we talk to customers like you. The conversation about automation is happening all over the place. Is there an entry barrier for this product to be used? And we believe the answer is yes, and probably that entry barrier is too high at this point, because we are implicitly setting the expectation that you, as a network engineer, have to learn new programming languages. You have to learn how to program, which is way even more complex, right? It's not something that you can learn overnight, or you can learn maybe just by reading a book, right? It requires years of experience. Now you also need to be familiar with a ton of different open source projects if you actually want to build this automation architectures yourself. Now you're even supposed to learn some AI and machine learning techniques to be able to apply them in your network context. But at the same time, if you're going to be building this, you need to develop and support your own automation to happen on top of everything else that you're supposed to master, because you are operating or managing, or your team is operating or managing a network infrastructure. So we believe here we have a huge gap in the expertise that is required, right? And we are implicitly forcing the life of a network engineer to be way more complicated as they try to get into the automation journey, whereas we should be doing the opposite. We should make the life of the network engineer easier. So what we think we need to do to make automation really successful is to change this paradigm. We need to make automation simple. And the next few slides, we will see some good examples of how we can accomplish the same. Let's start first by how we can make automation simple through visual workflows. When we want to automate any task that we execute on a network, and that task could be a software upgrade, could be a configuration change, could be a password change, could be anything, any method of procedure that usually will require a good number of steps. And those steps might actually be different depending on the context, right? Some steps might require checking things on the network. Some steps might require configuring something. Some other steps might require doing some conditions, checking, getting an approval, and so on. What we need to be able is to break that workflow into subtasks, into components that potentially can be connected together in a visual way without requiring the network engineer to actually do software development, right? If we can make the process of building this workflow simpler, we can generate a context where 80% of the expertise required here is truly the domain expertise whether you know about BGP or about the technology that we are trying to automate. And only 20% is really required relative to the knowledge or expertise associated to building the workflow itself. So we lower the entry barrier for that process. When we accomplish that, creating these workflows becomes a truly visual work where you create flow charts, you connect building blocks together, and there's no strong requirement for software development skills or knowledge of programming languages. And this is what will make the difference between having a 40% or less than 40% automation into having a much broader adoption of automation, and in that process, taking advantage of the benefits of the same, right? If we can only achieve in your operation team that only 1 or 2 engineers are capable to automate, that will inherently limit your abilities. But what if we could all your team be able to automate and be able to create these visual workflows, which very much everyone could? So that will make a meaningful difference. And when you do that, when you start to automate workflows across your entire operation, you can start taking advantage of the efficiency gains that process would achieve. And what I'm showing here is just an example of how an IPv6 migration process can be accelerated by creating a workflow in our in the Atom technology that we are using versus doing the process manually. And it's not only about the increase in efficiency, but also the ability to execute all these instances of the workflows or the process of migration in a way that is predictable and error-free, as opposed to how it would be if it was manual. So let's switch gears now to another key aspect of the automation process, which is about how do we monitor the network, and how do we do it as well with a much simpler paradigm, in this case, leveraging what we call playbooks. And I'm going to use as the example technology to illustrate this, one of our products that we've been developing over the past few years, which basically has been built following the same paradigm. How do we make monitoring simpler? One of the key interesting insights that we got from the Sonar report is that almost 40% of the customers have felt the need to develop their own custom monitoring tool. And that's probably because the industry didn't provide what they needed or in the way they needed to monitor the network in their particular context. So we wanted to build Healthbot in a way that is truly extensible. I will not go into a lot of detail about Healthbot. There is a very interesting session in the virtual summit about revolutionizing the network operation and transforming streaming telemetry into self-healing, which I would really encourage you to go through that session. But I just want to highlight in this slide that one of the core principles or elements of Healthbot is the ability to create these use case focused playbooks. And those playbooks encapsulate potentially a wide range of use cases to monitor virtually anything from your network, taking advantage of all the different methods that Healthbot has to collect the information. And when you do that, when you create those playbooks, or maybe when you take advantage of the playbook library, you can address multiple types of use cases without the need, again, to be a software developer or to know about how to program, because this is a very high-level domain-specific language. We are again trying to close the expertise, the gap in expertise for a network engineer to be able to effectively monitor the network. First of all, making monitoring simple, making it easy to create this concept of playbooks without software development skills, using a highly abstracted domain-specific language, and therefore lowering the entry barrier for anyone in your team to be able to create these use cases, to be able to automate at any time of the day the collection of certain data and the analysis associated with it. But we're taking this further, and it's not just about being able to create playbooks, it's about the expertise that is actually required to monitor the network. If you need to monitor a certain protocol, you probably need that expertise. So we also want to be able to connect you and anyone in your team with a community of engineers that has a lot of expertise and that we are compiling in the form of a library of playbooks. So by having access to that community expertise, we're also making it simpler for you to start monitoring different type of technologies because you can use them right out of the box. But now taking it a step further, right? We don't think it is realistic that for any of you to take advantage of machine learning techniques, that you or your engineers in your team should become data scientists. That's just way too complicated. I mean, some might do it because they feel interested on learning about that. But what we are trying here is, how do we make machine learning much more easily consumable by a network engineer? How do we lower the entry barrier so you can take advantage more broadly of these techniques in your network operation? So now we have discussed about how to make monitoring simpler to the concept of playbooks. How do we make workflow automation simpler through the concept of low-code automation with these visual workflows? Now we can connect the two and effectively make closed-loop automation simpler for your network operation. First of all, by having playbooks in Healthbot, being able to collect telemetry or any kind of information and analyzing it in the way you need without requiring complex software development skills, and then being able to connect those insights with remediation workflows or maybe troubleshooting workflows in the Anuta Atom platform. So in doing that, we would make closed-loop automation truly deployable and effective in your network operation context. So we have reviewed some of the key functional areas of automation and the connection that they have with the business: service abstraction, workflow automation, resource optimization, as well as the insights that machine learning and artificial intelligence might bring. We've been double-clicking, particularly in the session, about workflow automation and ML and AI insights and how we can make that process simpler. Both have direct impact on the business outcomes. Workflow automation will drive predictable operations, will automate processes, and will standardize your methods, procedures. And machine learning and insights and the ability to create easy-to-use playbooks will empower you to do a more proactive network operation, early detection, and in connecting with the workflow automation, enable automated remediation in your network operation context. In Juniper, we are working in an automation portfolio that will deliver on the 4 functional areas that I highlighted. And this automation portfolio is built out of 3 key technology pillars: Anuta Networks Atom, that will address the service abstraction as well as the workflow automation using this low-code automation paradigm that I referred earlier. Healthbot, another key pillar on the solution, deriving AI and ML insights, taking advantage of the streaming telemetry and the playbook programmability. And the third pillar of the solution, which we didn't address today, it's Northstar, that enables this fully automated resource optimization based on different types of constraints. So I hope in this session I've given you some insights on what are the challenges that we identify in the automation, in the process of automating workflows, how automation is really aligned with the business goals. And if we don't address those challenges, if we don't lower the complexity, if we don't lower the entry barrier for automation to be deployed, we will not be able to take advantage of those business goals. So I hope you found it interesting, and I would be very happy if we can travel with you in this automation journey. Thank you.